Another third period lead, but also another third period collapse for the Panthers. On today's edition, we're going to discuss the Florida Panthers' 4-3 loss against the Edmonton Oilers, where they don't have a lot of time to ponder this loss as they will have a quick turnaround before facing Calgary on Tuesday night. We're going to discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, November 29th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're at your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And don't forget to also subscribe to all the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. And don't forget to enter the Locked On Florida Panthers contest to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus New Jersey Devils game on December 21st by sending a screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel, as well as leaving a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. You can send that to me at LO_FLA Panthers on Twitter, or if you don't have Twitter, you could send it to LockedOnFLA at gmail.com. So, Cats fans, like I said, another third period lead, another third period loss, collapse, for these Florida Panthers, and especially on the road, which for this one, I mean, I don't feel as bad about this one as I do about Saturday's game against the St. Louis Blues because of how much of a lead the Florida Panthers had. And of course, it's harder to win on the road, but the Florida Panthers going into this one, they were 3-4-1 on the road prior to facing the Edmonton Oilers, and just the Panthers, they had so many opportunities to create separation as well. I mean, the possession numbers, I mean, you see the box score 40-28 shots on goal advantage for the Edmonton Oilers. But even in that first period for the Oilers, they had 7 more shot attempts for over the Panthers. But at even strength, they both had the same amount of shots on goal at 10 at 5-on-5. The Panthers were forcing them outside, creating some perimeter shots. Nick Cousins was getting active really early on that first line and creating that goal by Matthew Tkachuk, which since January 1st of 2022, listen to this stat. Matthew Tkachuk is second in the NHL in points behind Connor McDavid, just 3 points behind. He has 107. Connor McDavid has 110. And even with all that dominance of possession that the Edmonton Oilers had, and the Florida Panthers killing that 5-on-3, which that Lundell penalty was maybe a little soft on that one. The Spencer Knight was the ultimate penalty killer on that one. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl had multiple chances. I mean, credit also to Zach Hyman as he was falling forward on the ice, getting that puck to Leon Draisaitl, and then Spencer, his ability to recover and to make saves on that 5-on-3. I mean, the Panthers. This is one of the rare games where you'll see the Corsi for percentage favor the other team, and especially on the power play for the Panthers, I mean, their inability to create separation as well is a problem for them as well. And on that power play, the Edmonton Oilers forwards were so much towards the blue line that it was creating so much space down below. Matthew Tkachuk was getting the puck near the trapezoid, where so many eyes were on him, just going like a full 3 or 4 seconds all by himself on an island waiting for other players to cut in. So just to goes to show how much of a threat that guy is, and that's your opportunity to create something to create some separation for the Panthers. And also the fact that the Edmonton Oilers also had a goal called back as well. Zach Hyman, you've heard his name a lot, of course, but the kicking motion into the net as well. That was something that was called back. Spencer making a rare mistake in this one, not gloving it. The Oilers were on the forecheck, and Gudis loses the puck, and then that goal happens. But then they reverse it, and I mean the amount of opportunities as well. I mean, Darnell Nurse had a puck on the power play that was right off the crossbar. The two players who were really keeping up with Connor McDavid the most in this one was Gus Forsling and Etulis Duran. And I mean, Gus Forsling there was an opportunity where McDavid just spun around Mark Stahl, and Spencer Knight was there to save it. But then there was another play where Gus Forsling was just on a 3-on-1 as well. Gus Forsling breaks up a pass and doesn't even allow the Edmonton Oilers to have a shot on Spencer Knight as well. So a few great individual performances, but just continuing to have these laps. I mean, let's talk about the first goal of the game for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, you're on the PK, and of course at times when you clear the puck into the zone, your own zone, there's opportunities to get changes, get some fresh legs on the ice. But the Edmonton Oilers caught that. McDavid definitely did, and then of course you're not gonna outskate someone like that. Very reminiscent of Jordan Kyrou, except they weren't on a shift change, on a line change, but just the little attention to detail for the Panthers. I mean, it's just continuing to be a problem for them. I mean, and also in this one, I mean, you could argue that the Florida Panthers had an opportunity to had 0 points in this one. I mean, I'm credit to them. When it was 2-1 Oilers, the Panthers were just not getting zone time really whatsoever in the second period, mostly in the third period as well. It took them 7 minutes to get their first shot on goal in the third period, and the Oilers going up 2-1. But what I will give credit to where credit is due for the Panthers on that second goal, finished off by Anton Lundell. Sam Reinhart has had some highlight reel assists in the last few games. Every player touched the puck on that rush that created the goal to tie the game. But the goal that eventually gave the Panthers the lead to give them 3-2. Originally, I thought Matthew Tkachuk touched the puck with a high stick, but the referees ruled it as below the shoulder. So good goal on the power play too, where you had chance after chance, forcing the Edmonton Oilers defense to be out of position. Stuart Skinner out of his net as well, and Brandon Montour converts. And then all you needed was just one stop. I mean, the Spencer Knight looked like that he saved his best for last on Zach Hyman at the very end with like 4.4 not 4.4 seconds left. It was a few seconds before that, but the goal to tie the game just a little bit late on the poke by Aaron Ekblad right after Sam Bennett takes the draw, and McDavid is just a little bit faster to process the play right off the faceoff before getting it to Evan Bouchard. And Tyson Barrie as well for the Edmonton Oilers. He has 4 goals on the season. 3 of them have come against the Florida Panthers. So the Panthers are very lucky that they don't play the Edmonton Oilers for the rest of the season, because because for some weird reason, Tyson Barrie, not even a top pair defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers, just finds a way to score on the cat for the for the Oilers, and it's just continuing to be frustrating how. And I think this is for me kind of a buildup from the previous game of why I'm so frustrated. And it might not sound like that in my voice, but I'm not like I'm I wouldn't feel if the Florida Panthers didn't blow it on Saturday, I would probably be a little bit more optimistic about this one, but this is 2 games in a row. I know you're without your captain. Hopefully he comes back soon. He's gonna miss tonight's game against the Flames. But even then, you still gave yourself a chance to win multiple times. The Panthers are now 1-2 without Sasha Barkov. I said the record incorrectly on the previous episode because I forget that he missed the Carolina game as well. But that was not related to the non-COVID illness that the team says he has. But you still had your chance to win. You still had your chance. And you had the lead twice, 1-0, and then 3-2. And then as soon as the Florida Panthers were unable to get the forecheck 3-on-3, when you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on a 2-on-1, there was no chance for Spencer Knight to create a stop on that one, because those are the 2 of the best players in the NHL. And there are times where Connor McDavid was not creating separation, but just you give him a little bit of space and he's off to the races. And just his hockey IQ on that game time goal for the third one, like I said, a little bit quicker than Aaron Ekblad off that draw with just less than 20 seconds left in the game. And just the Panthers now sit a point out of the playoffs right now, but with these last 2, you sit more comfortably if you were to pull it out, of course. But it's just, for me, it's more frustrating because of the buildup of what was from Saturday's game. But in segment number 2, we are going to discuss some of your hot takes from what you replied after Monday's loss against the Edmonton Oilers. And we are going to continue the conversation about the state of this team. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find these at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Second segment here on this Tuesday, November 29th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers drop their game against the Edmonton Oilers by a final score of 4-3 in overtime. Another drop point. Now the Florida Panthers are 3-4-1 when scoring first on the road. And again, they're unable to create that separation whenever they do have a lead, and of course, not keeping leads as well. And Spencer Knight, 36 of 40. The box score doesn't do it justice when you look at it. Just the amount of times he kept the Panthers in this one was just, he's shown to be very reliable for this team. And the best saves that he had were the ones against Zach Hyman were involved in, where there was, like we said earlier, the 5-on-3 getting it to Leon Draisaitl, and towards the end of the game off a rebound. So just Spencer Knight is that dude. He really is. And I'm super excited that not only are we going to see another 3 years out of this guy once his new contract kicks in, but then what he could receive after that, which will equal the amount of which will likely not equal, excuse me, to the amount that both of them are making, both Bob and Spencer are making combined this year. Let's just talk about this year with just under 11 million. Spencer's next contract in 3 or 4 years from now won't surpass what those two have combined. So so I still have a good feeling that this Panthers team is going to be okay. But we got to start questioning the coaching and the preparation. And what is the message that Paul Maurice is sending to his team in between periods? It's fair to ask, how are you getting your team mentally ready to go out there for another 20 minutes? They look like the complete opposite team on Saturday in that final 20. They had a lead once again, but this time was on Monday's game. It was after the first 20, because you had higher quality shots in the first period on Monday. But how are you getting your team prepared? What is the messaging? And he even said something that I was saying on the podcast just yesterday with Alex Slump of Full Press NHL, that even without Barkov, you have a chance. And he spoke about the stretches that the Panthers have been on without Barkov. You're putting a full talented 20 skaters out there, and still you're finding ways of just losing a little bit of focus, and that focus is costing you points. And just looking at the standings right now, seeing 24 points in 22 games. I can't really do math on the top of my head, but I know that's not over a 100-point pace right now for the Cats. And it's got to take some type of run. And we saw a run in 2016, but it was we knew that team wasn't a Stanley Cup contender. We know, I'm pretty damn sure that this team this year is not a Stanley Cup contender. They could maybe win a round, just like last year, but I'm not convinced that this year specifically that they are at that point. And there's only so much that we can blame the lack of cap space. It's just the players on the ice have to find a way to just lock it down, have a certain messaging in the locker room. I mean, I don't know what's being said once again, but there's got to be a different type of approach coming out of intermissions. This will be a good time for me to read some of your hot takes after this loss to the Edmonton Oilers, and only because I sent out the tweet 15 minutes before recording. Only got a few responses here, but from at 47 to full saying Bennett will be traded before the trade freeze in December. He is not worth the money he is paid. And then at Heel Son says Maurice will actually be fired. I still don't think Maurice is going to be fired, but there are still very questionable ways that he's approaching the games. Like I said, coming out of intermissions, that it's just the Panthers are just not a focus group right now. And my hot take is that the Panthers went from great to mediocre. This right now, Florida Panthers fans, is a mediocre hockey team. Inconsistent as can be. Oh, great. A win against the Carolina Hurricanes without Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, Aaron Ekblad. Gets all your hopes, then loses to the Oilers at home, where you have so many shots on Stuart Skinner. Gets a great win against the Boston Bruins, only their third loss of the season. Then you lose 2 heartbreakers against the St. Louis Blues at home, and then the first game of this West Coast trip against the Edmonton Oilers, their second time, where even though you could have gotten 0 points, there's still an opportunity for 2. Funny enough. So, what's Paul Maurice going to do? Matthew Tkachuk's doing his job. Spencer Knight's doing his job. Gus Forsling's doing his job. Everyone else? I mean, Sam Reinhart. So, let me give Sam Reinhart some roses too. Sam Reinhart has been great lately. He's had some, like I said, highlight reel assists lately. Everyone else? I don't really have much praise right now for the rest of the roster as far as how they're performing. And if you guys have been listening to me for a while, I'm usually a glass half full type of person. It's really hard right now to be glass half full. I still think there's a great team, but just there's concerns that could pop up later. Even if this team squeezes into the playoffs, there's some major concerns of just lapses, just inability to clear the zone as well, and just not cashing in when you have already a lead to create more separation, so that not necessarily that your foot steps off the gas, because we saw what it was like on Saturday, but to just give a little breathing room so that you don't give the opposition a chance. The Panthers are lacking that. And their total goal differential for the season is +1. Ooh, what a change from last year. Ooh, what a change. Just frustrating overall. And it's frustrating too for me and for you guys as well that you guys stayed up so late to watch this too. I mean, it's 1:33 a.m. as I'm looking at my the clock on my computer. And I mean, I'm still going to stay up for the rest of the road trip. I mean, I love this team. I love watching this team. I want this team to do well. But man, staying up for these and having and seeing a blown lead makes it all that more frustrating for all this. In segment number 3, we are going to transition over to tonight's game because the Panthers have a quick turnaround. Funny enough, where the Florida Panthers will be facing off against the Calgary Flames, and Matthew Tkachuk will be making his return to Calgary for the first time since the trade. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Tuesday, November 29th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Just me today, just getting raw reaction. We're 45 minutes after the final buzzer, well, the game-winning goal for the Edmonton Oilers. Paul Maurice said after the game, was asked, what does this team need to have a better jump? And it says getting Sasha Barkov back. And just hearing that, at least from the reading it on Twitter, it just reading that is like made me cringe a little bit. And it's just like, dude, you had a lead, and you've had multiple times without Barkov that you could score a few goals in a row with unanswered. But also credit, I want to give credit to Matthew Tkachuk. Reign of Booze from Edmonton, a former rival. Of course, in his introductory press conference to the Florida Panthers, he said, I hate Edmonton, but now I hate Tampa more, but still having that hate for Edmonton, part of that rivalry. And then having his hand near his ear when he scored on that goal, which was a broken play. But Matthew Tkachuk scores on those broken plays. There's some positives. Of course, Matthew Tkachuk, what a joy to watch. What a joy. And the Panthers are really fortunate to have him on this team. And like I mentioned earlier, the point total since January 1st of 2022, the whole Bill Zito saying that this guy is a unicorn is a very valid sentence that Bill Zito uttered. But now it's the return. The Florida Panthers will be facing the Calgary Flames tonight. And I don't think Tkachuk will get as many boos as Johnny Gaudreau whenever he does make his return to Calgary, due to the fact that they got Huberdeau and Weegar in that deal. Of course, Tkachuk said that he was only going to sign a 1-year deal and then hit free agency, which means if he were to sign that, he would be a UFA, not an RFA. So he would, he uses leverage as far as that. And then the Panthers are reaping the benefits of having a Tkachuk on the team. And you could see kind of the sense of direction about the different dimensions as we've seen through 22 games. But there's so many different things that outside of one player that, even though it's a treat, that in the losses you can see, okay, this guy at this age, if he continues doing all this, eventually they're going to be okay. But in the present moment, it's tough. But once again, like I mentioned in the previous segment, Paul Maurice, what are you going to do about getting your team ready out when you get out of the locker room in after intermissions? So a few scores around the league. Going to mostly focus on Atlantic Division teams because the Panthers are really hoping to still be in that top 3. The Lightning defeat the Sabres 6-5 in overtime. The Red Wings winning streak comes to an end at the hands of the Toronto Maple Leafs, 4-2, where Detroit had a 44-25 shot on goal differential, and still came out on the losing end. And that's basically all the scores for the night in the Atlantic Division. I mean, New Jersey goes to Madison Square Garden and wins 5-3. Igor Shesterkin had a few interesting quotes after the game. He takes full accountability about him letting his team down. That's a leader, honestly. And the Devils are still finding ways to win, even though their streak ended. Vegas defeats Columbus in a shootout, and Dallas defeats St. Louis 4-1 at Enterprise Center. And so now with the Panthers going into Calgary, I'm expecting Sergei Bobrovsky to be between the pipes, as this is a second of a back-to-back. I predicted him to be the starter in this one. I was wrong. Hard to predict starting goalies in this league. But now, if the rotation of the back-to-back is what it looks like based on Spencer starting Monday, it looks like Bob is going to be the guy for Tuesday against Calgary. And I don't know if there's going to be a tribute video. There was for Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar when they did come back, but can only imagine the rain of boos that that Matthew Tkachuk is going to have. And the Flames, the Panthers are catching them at a good time. A 3-game losing streak currently. 1-4, 1-2-1 since that Florida game. And that game against Calgary, even at home, the Panthers in their most recent matchup didn't deserve to win. They were playing from behind the whole time in that one. And the key is going to be continuing to not only score first, but to try to cash in and create a little separation when it comes to getting an early lead, because their record on the road when they score first is just not good right now. And that's the key for them. And I was saying 7 out of 10 points on this road trip would be a very positive sign for the Panthers, but you missed an opportunity at 2 on Monday. And it creates more of a sense of urgency for the Panthers to get a full 2 points in this one, right before facing a Vancouver Canucks team on Thursday night who has so much drama on their team, on and off the ice, which we will be hopefully discussing with a guest on the show on Thursday's show, who has been a previous guest. I'm not gonna say who just yet, but to talk about the state of the Cats and just who and ask the question, who is this team? What is their identity? But on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, it's a Winans Wednesday, which means Jacob Winans will be back to discuss everything that happened since the last time the Panthers since he was on, and then the 3 games in between. Of course, recapping Matthew Tkachuk's return, and of course, there might be a lot of feelings because there are currently a lot of feelings right now, and not good ones surrounding this team. More losses than win, something we're not used to in these last 2 years. And I'm not going to be coming here and saying, oh, at least they got a point. No. You had an opportunity for 2. If you were behind the whole time and then you get a point, cool, okay. But the last 2 games, you had an opportunity for 2. These last 2 games are not at least they got a point type of games. That is not going to be my mind. That is not my mindset after these last 2 losses. So definitely not. So 2 points is definitely very important for the Panthers to get on Tuesday night against the Calgary Flames. And Jacob and I will be there to discuss it. Hopefully there's not more bad feelings for as far as where we think the Panthers really are. But thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It's a very frustrating edition. You don't get this kind of tone out of me, out of your host very often. But it's just, this is a matter of just build up from a few days ago, from the results on the ice for this Cats team. And hopefully we don't have too many of these shows anymore where you get this kind of just frustration out of yours truly. So hopefully some good vibes are ahead and some wins as well for this team. But thank you for listening as well. And in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast and YouTube feed. Don't forget to enter the contest for the December 21st game against the New Jersey Devils if you want to win 2 free tickets. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen today. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today gives you a daily 20-minute or less podcast on the entirety of the sports scene. Locked On Today, Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.